Good evening. Just want to let you know briefly about the police response and what the role was of the police department in this incident. The police response was fourfold, primarily evacuation, staffing traffic posts, answering calls for service, and roving patrols, particularly in those evacuated areas. We called for 13 police agencies, the Sheriff's Department, which sent assistance from throughout Los Angeles County, and 12 Area D, Mutual Aid Area D, San Gabriel Valley cities. Probably the question that came up most throughout this incident were phone calls and flag downs for officers asking, from residents asking why, if they chose not to be evacuated, were they not allowed back into their neighborhoods or back into their homes. In the law, or our evacuations, so-called mandatory evacuations, are really not mandatory, they're advisory. So when the police come by to let you know that the area is under mandatory evacuation, it's still your option, as you may know, whether or not to leave. But if you do leave, the law allows that area, if it's been declared a mandatory evacuation, not to be re-entered. So, but with that in mind, we made repeated directives at our command center to filter down to the officers and the deputies staffing those areas to be flexible, and that if someone needed medication or had some compelling reason to go back into their home, to accommodate them whenever possible and to escort them if possible. So we tried to make accommodations for people in those situations. And that was really it. So thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
93 Kinaloa fire. I fought that fire, and I left my house and I forgot my wallet. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd been fighting the Kinaloa fire for 18 hours, and I lived up in the canyon, and the police wouldn't let me back in. I was wearing fire gear, and they wouldn't let me back in. So, good job. Caroline, do you want to talk briefly about revegetation?
Friday morning I got a phone call from Richard, which I couldn't answer because I was in a lecture hall for the American Academy of Sciences, and I had signed up to go to this lecture months in advance, and then I had obviously signed up for all the things that had to do with fire issues. So I'm sitting here. Actually, one of the presenters had the Sierra Madre fire on his PowerPoint already, but I didn't shout yay or anything like that. I just quietly kept it to myself. We have been handing out the Fire Safe Council, Controlling Nature's Wrath. I actually don't like the term wrath because I think that sort of anthropomorphizes something that's just natural. It turns it into something that it isn't. But it's subtitled California Living Fire Safe. We've given quite a number of these out. If you have one already, take another one. Give it to a neighbor that didn't show up tonight. If you've never had one before, take one with you. What I was doing there after Richard called me on the phone was collecting materials, and I actually had to go back downtown Los Angeles today to the University of California Agricultural Natural Resources. They have a agricultural extension office in downtown Los Angeles, left over probably in a building that served the agricultural community 100 years ago. But what I picked up from them are some very important things for us, because we have an opportunity now to plant wisely in areas that have been burned, so that 10 or 15 years from now we haven't planted a bigger fire hazard. So outside you'll find several handouts. Don't plant a pest, making your property fire safe, the landscaping in the WUI, which now has another name. This was a wildland urban interface, and now it's called Very High Fire Hazard Severity Zone, which I think when you label something properly you get a better idea about it. And then invasive plants and wildflower fires in Southern California. This kind of really focuses on San Diego County. I listened to several people speak at this conference on Friday who I also heard in Malibu last October. And Malibu had a turnout much like this one here tonight. And a week later they had their third fire of 2007. They had a January fire, they had a fire I think in October, and then again in October. You really cannot remove enough of the fuel load in the whole national forest. Our program tonight, which was on ember intrusion, which we've postponed because of the very important topics for tonight, we still want to impress on the homeowners parts of their home that are still vulnerable to ember intrusion, and we'll be doing that as well later on. So there's all sorts of levels of information that are coming at you all at once because of the fire that we had in April. And I had just written an article in the news for the fact that April didn't seem like a very likely month for wildfires. I think the last one in April happened about 20 years ago. So we get to add to that statistic. Take all of the information we have for you. There's Fire Safe Council information out there, as well as information about not planting invasives and suggestions of what to plant. Oh, by the way, the university extension officers have gone around to places like Lowe's and other places where people can buy plants and ask them not to stock certain plants. So people, in some instances, don't even have the option of buying the wrong stuff anymore. Thank you.